To get started, we should define a couple terms. When we talk about tonguing at the tip of the reed, we're talking about right in this area of the reed, not on the edge of the reed. And the tip of the tongue is different for everyone, but I think of it as being the very front of the top of the tongue, not the actual edge or anything underneath. What we're trying to do right now is make sure that we absorb the feeling of having the tongue on the reed with the air pressure in the ready to play mode. In other words, all the preparatory work that takes place in the breathing mechanism is set and, in fact, blowing, but the reed is simply being stopped from vibrating by the tongue touching it. So the exercise I would recommend to start with is simply to blow a long tone and interrupt it by touching the tongue to the reed, and without changing anything, then eventually taking it back off and seeing if we can get the same sound at the point of touching the reed that we get as soon as it is released from the reed. What you're listening for is not so much the color of the sound, but that there is no diminuendo as the sound stops and no crescendo as it starts. It should be completely the same. It should not explode out when the tongue is removed from the reed, but it should start at full volume. If this is the case, then your airstream is properly prepared. The other thing I would say is that while the tongue is touching the reed, remember the physical feeling of the air pressure trying to push the tongue off of the reed. That's the feeling you're going to need, because in playing, you're going to start almost every note with the tongue on the reed. I know that there are players who start with the air some of the time. Maybe there are some who start a considerable amount of the time. For me personally, I'm almost always starting with the tongue, with the only caveat that occasionally soft in the upper register you might start the air a little bit and then kick the reed off with the tongue. That's a really occasional thing, and it sounds something like this. That's just a little bit of air to warm up the reed, but most of the time you are just starting with the tongue on the reed. That's just the reed being allowed to vibrate by the tongue coming off with the air fully prepared. Without that airstream, you can't go any further. So once you have that feeling memorized, then you're ready to go on to the next step.